Hey folks, welcome back to Fan Talk. I'm David.
I'm Simon.
Logan.
Logan is going to be on our panel, and guys, welcome to the first episode of Watching Watchmen. Which is going to be our deep dive into the new HBO series Watchmen. Each episode as it airs, we're going to be taking that, breaking it down, talking about the importance of the things socially, how it relates to the original graphic novel, trying to make it a little more accessible to some of you who haven't read the books. So, starting off, Logan, Simon, what did you think of the first episode?
First of all, spoiler alert.
Yeah, we're going to be getting into some spoilers here, talking about the first episode.
So if you haven't watched it, pause this, watch it, come back.
Then come back and watch it.
Yeah, we'll wait.
And make sure you like and subscribe, guys. Okay. So, what do you guys think of the first episode?
There we go. I loved it. And I know a lot of people didn't. I know a lot of people did. And I think a lot of the people that didn't are the ones that aren't familiar with the graphic novel and don't know where the source material very well. And they're kind of coming in blind, not knowing what's going on. All the references that they're dropping here in the first episode, all the names from the past, from whether it be the movie or the graphic novel.
Yep.
They kind of expect you to know who they are already, which is kind of confusing to some people just walking into this.
Yeah.
So, I think some people are getting maybe put off or confused by the fact that I thought this was meant to be a sequel to the movie, but it's not.
No, it's actually a sequel to the graphic novel.
Yes.
And it takes place in present day 2019, but it's present day after the comic book, which I think it's roughly 30 years later.
I think it was
That's set in the
74
80s.
when I was.
Or 74? I don't know.
It seems like they're saying it's like 35 years in the future,
right?
From the graphic novel.
It was during Nixon's fourth term.
Yeah, and now Robert Redford is president.
Instead of reparations, it's Redfordation.
Yeah, so like that.
Which I thought was pretty funny.
But it's been basically, obviously, this world has been on an alternate timeline since the 20s or 30s, and the show opens up 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma, which ironically is where we are.
Yeah.
So for you that
we're not that bad, everybody.
For you that don't know, this is filmed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So this actually is really relevant.
The race riots did actually happen. We had nothing to do with it. It was a long time ago. It was a bad chapter in history, let alone Tulsa history. It still comes up in the news locally here on issues. So actually it was a real thing. The depiction in the TV show seemed fairly accurate. Even down to an airplane being in the sky. And so that's where the show starts off, and they don't really tell you exactly why they're starting off there just yet.
No, and that's what's interesting about all this. And there's a lot of people that were confused online also about that being an alternate timeline still, and like the race riots never actually happened, which is interesting.
The time
coming from Watchmen,
happens.
How they want to change everything, and they took this point in history in this specific event and... Yeah, right down to a T. What happened?
Also,
which is interesting.
One little thing I want to throw out: remember the silent movie they're watching, the very opening shot?
Yes.
With Bats Reeves or Sheriff Reeves.
Yeah.
That's actually a real black sheriff.
Yeah.
That was a nice little touch. But the timeline deviates with the beginning of mass superheroes in the 30s and 40s, which is about the time comic books started coming out.
Yeah.
So this is still before it deviates.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about all this, it's interesting with it starting the Tulsa race riot. I think it fits perfectly for Watchmen because they're trying to create an atmosphere of just a really tense atmosphere.
Very tense.
A very tense atmosphere. And at that point...
The whole episode, everybody's just on edge.
On
with
edge.
Each other.
And it kind of bleeds in well, and so I know a lot of people in Tulsa are a little worried, but anybody that's been here knows that that's not how it is now. It's a bad chapter of our past, but it kind of fits in perfect with Watchmen and what they're trying to build. They're actually building something off of the original graphic novel.
Yeah, this is all going to make sense eventually, and why they started there, and there were 9 episodes. Well,
so obviously it had a kind of a darker and a very kind of tense tone throughout this first episode. Was there any other kind of themes or different things that you picked up in this episode along those lines?
Well, there's a lot of underlying themes. I think that the biggest thing about the show is kind of the things that are confusing people, and then there's a lot of people coming from left and right, like the Rorschach masks being a symbol of racism.
Let's jump right into that.
And also, Watchmen was more of a satire to begin with, and I think that's also what they're working with here, also, as just another version of it. So,
because I started watching it, and it's been a while since I've read the comics, so I wasn't even thinking. I was just kind of keep my mind open. I'm like, man, these police, what's going on with them right now? And then I was like, oh yeah, okay, they're meant to be covering themselves up kind of like superheroes, and it's just the racial tension is stronger than anything I've seen in a show in a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big takeaways is from the original race riots, the whole area was tore down and is really just now being revitalized. In the show, that whole area has been rebuilt and is another prosperous, black area now.
Yeah. And also a lot of the police in the show are black. It seemed like they really highlighted that quite a bit.
Yes.
Which only adds to the racial things when they're dealing with the 7th Cavalry, the racists, basically.
See, the 7th Cavalry are basically a newer version of the Ku Klux Klan. Right. And they're just using Rorschach's work, his journal that was released to the public, and using quotes from that, using quotes from Ozymandias also to kind of further their agenda, taking things out of context to fit their narrative. And I think that's what's really interesting about it so far.
I thought a little fun trivia was the 7th Cavalry is actually Custer's cavalry.
Yes.
Yes. It was
also real.
It didn't work out well for him.
It didn't work out too well for Custer either. No. I thought it was a pretty interesting, a lot of the things that are really tied to the graphic novel. So real quick, I want to go over a couple of things for a lot of you fans who are like, hey, I'm going to watch Watchmen. And you get lost because you're like, what the heck is going on? And I think that's kind of something that...
where's this going?
Yeah, and I know that after a couple episodes go on, they're going to explain a lot more. It's going to be a little simpler. But just so you know, this is a continuation of the graphic novel. And the graphic novel, Dr. Ozymandias actually, instead of in the movie, which a lot of you have seen where there was a bomb, he actually creates this giant squid in a lab and drops it on the city.
As one does.
And they thought there, Zack Snyder doing the movie, he was like, maybe a little too far out there for just general audiences, so we're just going to make it a bomb. Let's not drop a squid there to end everything.
The whole thought of Dr. Ozymandias was that if he could unite the world behind a common enemy, if they thought that we were being invaded by aliens, that would end all the tension of the Cold War.
Everyone would come together. All the superpowers would put down, their weapons against each other, and then unite against a common enemy, which it works.
So in a scene in the episode, what did you guys think about the scene where they're sitting in the car and all of a sudden the alarm goes off and just squids fall from the sky?
And they're like nonchalant about it.
Yeah. Well, it's just another day for them. It's just like a light rain out there. So it's very interesting. So a lot of people watching this episode that know nothing about the graphic novel are sitting there going, why the hell are squids falling from the sky?
My first thought was only one man, Derek, gives me the raspberry. Derek gives me the squid.
Yeah. So, little things like that are going to confuse people. What the hell's going on? And I know, again, it's 9 episodes long from what I understand. And they'll get there. They'll explain everything, I'm sure. Flashbacks.
Well, first, I thought it was funny when they brought up the Redfordations. I might be mispronouncing that.
Redfordations.
Yeah, and then
Redfordations.
Later on, they obviously covered that Robert Redford has been a multi-time.
Robert Redford's president right now, right?
Okay.
He actually became president after Nixon, and he's been president for the last 28 years.
Yeah.
So.
And I noticed a little girl's reciting off the names of the presidents, and she skips Kennedy. Goes straight from Eisenhower to Johnson.
Okay.
I thought that was another little thing right there. And obviously, also, they showed Nixon on Mount Rushmore, which I thought was a great little... Tricky Dick on the mountain.
Yeah. That's right. Well, I also like the little nugget where she's talking about where she's from, and they're like, "Oh, is that before it became a state?"
Vietnam.
Vietnam's a state. Oh, that's awesome. That's
a big state. Timeline.
Did better in that war, I guess.
Also, I don't know if you noticed the City of Tulsa logo is very reminiscent of our actual logo.
It does look very, very similar.
So I was pretty happy with that little attention to detail.
From the police cars to the trash cans, everything. Tulsa just plastered all over everything. So, which is kind of cool. I mean,
Actually, not a bad looking city. Come visit.
Yeah, it's not horrible. Don't believe what you hear about us.
Obviously, we've seen a few of the characters from the, obviously the comic book and some also from the movie. What other characters are you guys hoping to see?
Well, who's alive at this point?
Yeah, I would love to see that's not
we have Silk Spectre alive, which I don't know.
Rumor is she's
going to be in there in the next 3 or 4 episodes. And if you've seen the trailers, then you've seen at least Manhattan's leg his blue leg walking around.
Well,
there.
they showed him on the TV, back in the background on the TV walking around on Mars.
Well, Dr. Manhattan is still a big part of this. You got to think about it even from the marketing standpoint. One of the marketing.
He's synonymous with Watchmen.
He's the only true superhero.
Yes.
Yeah, and
everyone wants to see that big swinging blue thing.
Yeah.
Well, plus part of it, like the advertising has been.
HBO is liking it slightly. So,
nothing ever ends. That's what he's like. Nothing ever really ends.
So he's still in self-exile right now.
On Mars.
Yes.
Which is where he should
since
probably
the squid happened and everything else, he feels responsible for it, and he's been in self-exile on Mars.
If I was rating squids daily, I'd want to move to Mars.
Yeah. He's alone up there. He gets some peace and quiet. So. But, it's going to be interesting to bring him back in after all this time, and which to him has probably only been, a week or so, and he'll come back down here after 30-some-odd years and see how everything's going, and it's getting a little tense again.
And we'll see how much humanity he still has empathy for.
Yeah.
So that was another big thing.
Well,
kind of losing that.
Big thing I want to get into now is to start diving into the episode of how this all ties into everything. So, one of the big things I think that really kind of relates this to the original work is if you think about it in the first opening scene of the graphic novel, it's the death of the comedian and it's investigating that murder. And I don't know if you guys kind of noticed that this was almost in reverse. It opens up leading up to a murder. And that's where we end that first episode is with, spoilers, Don Johnson swinging from a tree.
Right.
Which nobody expected him to go out this quick. I mean, obviously you're going to be seeing him in flashbacks. They didn't just bring him in for a few scenes in the first episode.
With the big, question mark of the mystery of obviously this very old Louis Gossett Jr. in a wheelchair, looking like he's responsible, but he's
clearly not able to physically capably do that.
Yeah.
Well, I also at the beginning there's a little irony where he's sitting there asking if they think that he can lift I can't remember how much weight.
A certain amount.
200 pounds, yeah. And
why was that in there? And then later on they kind of reference back.
Foreshadowing.
Chekhov's gun.
But
I can see how this episode would have confused everybody because I feel like this is kind of we're going to be getting an awful lot of flashbacks tying into what happened here in the first episode, and I think how it came to be there at the end.
Well, let's talk about some of the social things I think is interesting. Okay, for first of all, it's guns are outlawed.
Mm-hmm. The cops have to get
permission
back from the station
and vote.
And we can talk about how much that actually is relevant in today's society because there's definitely a line drawn in the sand with the people who are against gun ownership and people who are for it. And I think this is shown an interesting light because it could be debated.
It shows
once
both
again,
sides.
both sides because you're gonna have people that say, "Hey, that's excellent." Then you're gonna have the people that are like I won't lie, myself was sitting there going, "How come this cop has to have permission to draw his dang gun?"
No, it was to draw a taser. I think. Well, it was a taser, and then the outlaw over here has an illegal firearm.
And obviously the Constitution must have been changed in this alternate timeline to let this happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks, Nixon.
I just think that.
It depends on how everything's laid out too. Lawsuits, everything else. So I'm sure it's just a.
Well, and it was interesting, when you say lawsuits, it's obviously something has happened because when Don Johnson's character's we're going to vote, they actually had a way to release it to where they could all have their guns, but it was
there were a lot of them that didn't agree with it.
Yeah, it was very frowned upon. So it's
he kind of did a voice vote. He's like, "Yeah, eyes have it."
Yeah. They kind of pushed that through.
I heard two people say yes.
But in this world,
you over there, yeah, all right.
In this world, you also notice that there's not. There's super technology, what they're flying around in at the end. But you'll notice.
Oh, they're flying. That's night owls.
Yeah. But there's no cell phones. And a lot of you might notice this. There's no internet.
Mm-hmm. Also realize that there's seems to be no, in a certain sense, no freedom of information, especially transparency from the government, being able to hide employees without having to release that information.
That's what a big part of this is. So apparently, it is from the graphic novel, The Squid Falls, and now I guess everybody is believing that they're starting to believe that this is some sort of government conspiracy, and they're not telling the people the truth. And they orchestrated it, which they're kind of half true, but it wasn't the government. It was Ozymandias getting everything done here.
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like a police state that restricts their own guns. which is interesting.
It is a very interesting world because there's a lot going on that I am like so against, like from a political standpoint. When you look at it, it's just like there's not a lot of freedoms. On the other side of things, it seems like people
very straight-laced.
Are
Also
trying to be
President for life as
responsible.
well.
It's like they're trying to be responsible with it, but it's just not working.
And also,
I think the hate's kind of bubbling to the surface here is what it is, and they've repressed certain things for so long that this is going to end up being all-out war here again pretty soon.
And the way they set
what
up,
he wanted to kill is basically, rearing its head again.
Yeah. And what they've set up is, you're wanting to root for the police as a protagonist. Yeah. And I don't know if they're going to try and switch that around a bit.
Oh, I'm sure we'll go back and forth with that throughout the series.
Well, and
there's going to be some bad people on that police force.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's something that they're showing is like, I've liked this because right now, I don't know if you guys feel this way. I don't feel like there's a cut and dry good guy or bad guy.
There absolutely isn't.
Dr. Ozymandias, when they introduced him, which, you don't really realize. You might not realize that's him, but that's Jeremy Irons, folks. Yeah. And he is very interesting.
He's a naked old guy.
Yeah.
He's an older Ozymandias now, aged a few years.
And I'm glad she was massaging his
leg. When I saw that, I was like, oh my god, what's going on? And I was like, okay.
I'm pretty sure those are robot servants also. I'm not positive on that, but the more I watch, the more they look like androids or robots or something that sit there just to please him, and that's it.
Or very well
paid. Which he's the biggest narcissist in all of probably comic book history, so it would make sense.
But and the thing with the watch batteries, that was very interesting. You think that's obviously going to lead somewhere.
TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok.
Well, instead it was the ones, the older style watch batteries that have been outlawed.
Yeah.
I wonder what makes them outlawed.
Cancer. Remember?
Cancer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I actually said it's cancer. Yeah.
Cancer, supposedly.
Another interesting thing, like going into like the dynamics of the world, is like whenever they captured, like once again, you couldn't really root for her. She just went and kicks this guy's door in, throws him in her trunk, and they throw him in this pod, and he's like, "I want my lawyer," and they're like, "We don't have to do that."
No, it's basically vigilante justice.
Another part of the
but you're called. There are vigilantes working with the police. The police are all the just regular officers. Have the neon yellow here, and then the detectives are the ones that are dressed up as superheroes, basically.
Yeah, the one that silvery kind of mask.
Yeah,
the interrogation.
They basically have free reign to do whatever the hell they want to people. Yeah, and that's what I got out of it so far.
Under the cover of protecting against terrorism.
Questioning scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No lawyers, no nothing. We're gonna sit here and try and break you, and we'll figure out whether or not we think you're guilty, and if we think you are, we might throw you in a room and kick the shit out of you. That's how the police are working at the moment. That's what I can tell.
Yeah. Also, it's not based on verbal responses. They'll also check your vitals.
Heart rate.
To
see.
Well, again, that's back to your some high technology, some
no technology, which is really interesting because this is the world of Dr. Manhattan. So there is obviously technology, but it's interesting the stuff they keep repressed, and I think it really creates an interesting world because, like you said, the freedom of information, right? If there was an internet, if there was ways to get information out like there is today, but they're very much reliant on newspapers and word of mouth like it used to be, and so that can build a lot more tension.
North Korea.
A lot more tension, and now there's a lot more nefarious things going on behind the scenes.
I think it's easier for them to get away with stuff.
Oh, much easier.
Control the narrative, yes.
You can throw somebody in a back alley back there and beat the hell out of them, and if you're dressed up as a superhero, you're a detective, and they can get away with it. There's no problem here. Mm-hmm. So while I may not be agreeing with the 7th Cavalry and all what they're about here, you can see part of it is because of how. What's the word I'm looking for here? How under the thumb everybody is of this regime.
That's something
it really is a regime. If you have a president for 28 years, it's a regime.
And that's the thing that's interesting about
it. It is Robert Redford.
Yeah, it is Robert Redford. That's the interesting thing about this. I said is because you can see sides of everything, and I know that somebody's going to say something about when I say this, but I'm just going to be honest here. It's easy to side with those characters if you took the racism away from it.
No, if you take the biggest part of
it, because I feel like they're almost throwing that racism side in there to make them bad. But I think that I've seen some cuts from future episodes where it's almost don't stop them, and they're from what? So I almost wonder if at some side they're going to try and show a good side of them, kind of like we're seeing the bad side of
Bad side of the
Regina
Seventh Cavalry,
King.
but-
We're seeing the bad side of Regina King's character as she's like able to do whatever she wants, and we're seeing their evil side as we start to see. I think at some point we're going to see a shift where you see there is no good or bad. It's just the causes that we're like.
And I didn't really feel like she was bad.
No, I really didn't. I didn't have a problem with her.
All of us, you have to think of who you got on this panel.
No, deep down, I didn't see a problem
In that
with her.
world, it made sense.
It was
sense.
Don Johnson's character that I thought there's a lot more to.
Yeah,
he had more depth on that.
You know,
I
we can go out there and we can draw the guy. He seems like a good guy throughout most of the episode. They go and they have the little dinner scene, and then he just starts doing cocaine at the dinner table.
Yeah.
You know, with kids around and everything.
Yeah.
And you know,
Oh, I
it's
tell
just-
you,
he seems
I was kind of shocked. I didn't know which way they were
he
going to
seems
go
to
with
be the
it.
king of the mountain.
Yeah,
And-
I kind of thought whenever he was getting dressed and leaving, right, and the music they were playing, I thought it was going to show him go meet up, and he was going to be the head of the 7th Cavalry.
Yeah,
I
honestly
where
thought
we
that.
were
I thought
going.
he was good. Yeah.
I thought that's where we were going, and then she gets that call, and I'm like, nope, he's dead.
I didn't-
It took me a minute
Yeah.
because I was like, oh shoot, he's the big bad.
So, yeah.
You know, but he was.
But then, no, well, he may still be. It's just.
Well, that's also-
so you're going to see it in flashbacks.
So something to think about on this. So 7 Cavalry, their thing is we're everyone, we're no one.
Yeah,
So he had the flats. He walked around his car. He saw the spike strips.
Yeah.
Which is a law enforcement item, at least in our world.
Yeah.
Right? And
Makes
that's
you
when he
think-
looked down, he saw that, and he was like, oh. So
Makes you think somebody in his
in the
group
law
over there is
enforcement
against
side,
them.
or maybe he already knew, or
Maybe
like I said,
Panda Bear.
maybe he had something to do with it. So.
yeah,
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 It-
Panda Bear that
the
disagreed.
one that disagreed
could've
about
been-
getting the weapon.
Yeah. I mean, you were right. He could have, and he could still be a part of the 7th Cavalry. It's like the comedian, and oh god, now this is all making a little more sense. I think about it with us talking. The comedian, when he was killed in the graphic novel, you just think it's
Set
kind
off
of a
the chain of
murder.
events.
It set off a chain of events because actually he had found out about Dr. Ozymandias' plan, and he had to kill him to be able to finish. And so we could be looking
See,
at
and
a
what's
repeat
funny
of
is the
history.
comedian was a really horrible guy.
He was.
and
He
from
was.
where I can tell Don Johnson's character here, he wasn't all that great either.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna kick off the sequel kind of the same way we did the first one, where somebody had to die in order to cover up something, which Ozymandias, you already saw him out there at his castle riding his horse around. He's already got something else up his sleeve talking about it.
Yeah, he's
So this could just be history repeating itself.
and I think we're going to see a lot of tie-ins to the graphic novel, which is interesting. And before we go any further, I do want to go thread this out because not all of you watched the whole video. At the end of this video, you guys please go ahead and make your comments. Talk about like anything you think we might have missed.
Like, subscribe.
Yeah, like, subscribe, but definitely
Always do that.
put some insight into some of the things we're talking about. If you think we were really off on something, throw that down there, and we're gonna make sure you include your email because we're gonna read them all, and then we're gonna decide whose comment we agree with or disagree with the most. Whichever one really gets our attention.
Then we'll discuss it.
Actually,
Yeah.
not the email. Just obviously, we'll see your screen name. We'll give you a shout out. If we give you a shout out, then you can contact us later on, and we'll make the
And
connection.
yeah, we're gonna go ahead and send you a copy of the graphic novel. So make sure that you guys make lots of comments on there and like and subscribe.
And you'll get free stuff.
Free stuff. We're probably
Free
going to
stuff
do that
with
with every episode. We're going to be diving into every episode, but now we can continue here. So, what's y'all's kind of takeaway from the whole thing? Where do you think we're going with it?
Well, I was sucked in pretty fast, so I'm definitely hooked now to watch it. I mean, I love the movie, and I enjoyed the comic book when I read it years ago. So, comic book. Wow, I'm sorry, I'm going to get
There's gonna be a lot more
It's
slip of the tongue.
the graphic novel.
This is Alan Moore. You better hope Alan Moore's not watching. He's gonna get really upset.
One of the better ones. I'm going to say the because for me, the one would be V.
I get
But
it.
I am looking forward to the next 8 episodes.
Yeah.
I'm just going to enjoy the ride where they take me.
You know what's funny is they said that this is it. There is going to be no future seasons apparently from where they're coming. They said this is just a direct sequel and they're done after 9 episodes. But I'm sure if the ratings are high enough and everything, they'll
How much
figure out
money
something.
do they make?
That's exactly what's. Yeah.
Will
It's
Disney-
like Joker. Joaquin Phoenix said he's never going to do it again. Nah.
Will Disney buy it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Then they'll pump out all sorts of stuff. Anyway, but yeah, 9 episodes and no more after this apparently. So he's, Damon Lindelof said this is it for them, and he just wanted to make a direct sequel, and this is what it's going to be. So I'm really excited to see how this unfolds over the next 8.
I actually prefer it that way because I think when you have the set 9 episodes, it's not open ended. I think you get a bit more quality in the closure and also quality in the script, rather than like, oh, we can just keep it going, like just throw an episode out for a filler because we got to think about the next.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, everything from this is production, almost like a movie.
It's 9 movies.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of you guys
know. This is an expensive.
Oh yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know this is expensive. I mean, just think about who they got doing all the music. I mean,
Trent
Reznor is doing all the music for this, so it's all original music.
3-hour score that they're releasing for people here pretty soon. So I mean, that in itself, he also helped out with Twin Peaks not too long ago, and he's a big get for them. So
so I mean, it's like, and the music almost is as much a part of this
like
as Tulsa. Like Tulsa is a character if you think about it in this film.
It's a living,
breathing thing because it is really the tension and everything builds just from where it's happening and how the whole thing opens up.
I think it's a great setting for it because we don't need another superhero movie in New York City. And also having these racial tensions, while they do work in big cities as well, the specific type of characters, the stereotype of the characters they're using to show the 7th Cavalry and the police, this works better on a smaller city, the big rural area around it.
Yeah, and it shows that there's other parts of the world too, and that there's problems everywhere.
Some good things, some not so good things.
Yeah, no one's gonna believe like driving down 5th Avenue in New York. Like, what did you hauling? Lettuce?
Yeah.
Sure you are. Good point.
I think it brings a lot more history to light that nobody really talks about. What did it open up with?
Yeah,
the first black marshal, right?
Yeah,
he was in Oklahoma, Arkansas.
Yeah.
There were so many.
They don't read that in history books a lot.
There were so many people that thought this was an alternate. The race riots were an alternate reality, Watchmen had done for
that was.
They thought this wasn't real, so when they looked up the race riots in Tulsa, they're like, "Oh, that actually happened. That happened."
And why did it happen?
That Wikipedia article is actually correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes
it's right.
Yeah, it's the most prosperous black community in the United States, right here.
Black Wall Street.
It was Black Wall Street. It was very prosperous, and in fact, it was things here were really good at one point in time, and then it just the same kind of thing that happened here is tension started to build, and a small spark, believe it or not, blew that whole thing up. I mean, if a little bit of Tulsa history is the whole thing started in an elevator, basically. With an elevator attendant. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting.
About 9 miles that way.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that it does pull a lot of history into it. And, I mean, people can be upset about some of it and like, oh, that's horrible. Tulsa's a horrible place. These kinds of things happen all over the world, and we've become better for it. Yeah. And I think the background of it being in this film is a real homage to those communities and the people that live through those things. And for people to remember things like the first
being able to shine a light on something like that people may not know about.
Well, and obviously, race relations, there's still a thing, race relations and racism, and so by addressing it in the show is one way of just kind of having that social commentary on it. It's not going to fix it, but at least we talk about it.
Well, and I like how that's another thing. We're diving deep into this episode. If you think about the original graphic novel, it was really dealing a lot with the Cold War and the tensions between communism and
the times.
It was about communism and democracy, or you could even say capitalism if you wanted. And the sins of both. And now he's really taken, the hot spot right now, which I would say are things going on in our society. Class warfare, racism, and,
it's all the hot button issues rolled into one.
Guns, and then your left versus right, which we've all talked about. There's a lot of that in here of leftists, rightists, and there's things that are going to tick people off because it's like they're almost making the 7th Cavalry racist and saying that they're the right. And that's going to really tick off a lot of people on the right.
There's just a lot of people in general that have read the graphic novel that aren't happy with Rorschach masks being used in a racist sort of way like that. Rorschach wasn't a good person. He was insane, and he's not somebody to pattern yourself after. But
he was a fun character in a movie.
I mean, he's fun to watch. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of fans of the graphic novel and the movie, and sitting there going, he was never a racist. Like they're using him.
He hated everyone equally.
He really did. He hated everyone. So furthering their agenda by using him and his words in that journal is a little.
But think about it, like if that journal, if somebody has it, which we don't even know that.
No,
yet,
they know.
It looks.
journal is public knowledge.
Okay.
From the graphic novel,
he sent it to the reporter.
He sent it to the reporter,
but they always leave it kind of open on whether or not it was ever reported.
No, they were quoting out of the journal. It's somebody has gotten a hold of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, but you got to think about it. You take something like that. I mean, and this might offend people if it does. I'm sorry, but like, look at the Bible, for instance. You know, you can take a Bible and you can take a dozen different Christian faiths and how much they interfight with each other on their interpretation of it.
Pick and choose your verses there and interpret it however you want.
Exactly. Yeah. So that somebody has this journal and they're using it as their, quote unquote, like guidebook. I mean, you're going to take from it what you want.
Yeah.
Well, same for
and you can twist it into what you want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, but there is a lot of stuff in this.
I mean, look what they did with Scientology.
L. Ron Hubbard created one of the bigger religions going right now. Way to go, L. Ron Hubbard.
We're going to get shut down now. Scientology's going to
Tom Cruise or somebody's watching this.
Yeah, you guys are never going to see this. Scientology's going to shut us down.
I don't want to deal with the Scientologists, man. Don't mess with them. So.
Well, they went pretty far in this whole, the different social commentaries, and, I'm glad they stuck with a pretty benign sounding president. They could have gone with, Biff Tannen. Not to draw any parallels there. But, they from the sound of it, unless they completely change his personality, which would be interesting having a real life person in this now, because they wouldn't have grown up in their normal situation. They would have grown up in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could be completely different personality. So, but just from the sound of it, it sounds like a fairly benign president, other than the fact he stayed in power for so long.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like him on, well, we know Robert Redford wouldn't be on either side of this, which is
he'd just be kind of straight down the middle.
Yeah.
And see, we don't know how they. We'll see
how
they portray him, or if we even really get to know him throughout the series. Probably not. He's probably just more of a name.
I think the reason, though, for that, there's a little bit of I think, forethought in it, is I don't think they're trying to push too much politics, as in, like, who's in charge, as much as the politics of what's going on.
We don't know. You don't see anything other than Tulsa here. So maybe this is a isolated problem here. Maybe there's different.
Well, from what I can tell so far, it does appear that we're going to have a Silk Spectre. We obviously already have Dr. Ozymandias, and it seems like
he's not in Tulsa.
They are not in Tulsa. So this is obviously going to,
it's going to bleed into other areas.
It's going to kind of zoom out from the scope, I think, at some point.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is just the first episode. So, I mean, we're going to get more answers, and as it goes along. So,
and I'm looking forward to it, and we'll definitely be coming back here and talking about it.
Yes,
and breaking it down.
So, I mean, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. First episode of Watching Watchmen. Make sure you tune in. This episode actually is going to drop on Friday, but after this, we're going to try and get every episode out on Wednesday. So you have a couple days to reflect and get some ideas and get prepared for the next airing on Sunday. And also just remember that on the 12th of November, The Mandalorian starts.
Oh, yes.
We're going to be having a discussion on The Mandalorian, so get your Star Wars pants ready because we're going to have a lot to talk about.
I think there's a famous saying, remember the 12th of November.
Fantastic.
Well, once again, I'm Simon. This is Dave.
Logan.
And we have Derek. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.
All right.